Okay, good evening, everybody. Pasha Shmois. We're dealing with the subject of emes tonight. It says in this week's Pasha, Perek Gimel, Pasuk Yud Gimel. Vayomem Moshe el Elokim, and Moshe said to God, Hinei anochi bo el bnei Yisrael. Behold, I'm coming to the children of Israel. Va'amarti lahem, and I'm going to say to them, Elokei avoseichem shalachani. The God of your fathers sent me, Aleichem, to you. Va'omru li, and they're going to say to me, Ma shemo, what is his name? Ma umala aleichem, and what will I say to them? What shall I answer them? Vayom Elokim El Moshe, and Hashem said to Moshe, you should say to them, Ekia asher Ekia, which is, I will be that which I will be. Now you'll notice, I didn't pronounce it the way it's written, because as we'll see, Aleph and Hey and Yud and Hey is one of the Shemot of Hashem, one of the names of Hashem, one of the names which it's prohibited to erase. So it has a Kedusha, and any of Hashem's names which cannot be erased, cannot or should not be pronounced the way it's spelt, except of course if you're reading the whole Pasuk or if you're saying a bracha. Ekia. Ekia asher Ekia. I will be that which I will be. Very obscure, one might say. V'yomer kosamal of Israel. Thus you should say to the Jewish people, Ekia sholchani aleichem. Ekia, this name of Hashem, sent me to you. So what exactly was Moshe asking, and what did Hashem reply to him? So the Ramban explains, that's in note number 1, that the Jewish people want to know through which midah, which trait Hashem will redeem them from Israel. Now when we talk about the midot of Hashem, clearly has to be understood. Hashem has no traits in Atzmusa, in himself. It's not possible. Hashem is a perfect, simple unity in a way that we can't possibly understand. We have no real concept of what one is when we say Hashem Echad, much as we try, because everything in our world is not one. And possibly the only way we can understand that is we say V'hu Echad in Adon Olam, V'hu Echad ve'ein sheni. The only way we can really approach Hashem's unity is to describe it by its negative. He's not two. His oneness is something which only He himself understands, Kaviyachol, so to speak. So when we talk about Hashem revealing the Kates, revealing the redemption, how will the redemption be brought? Through which midah, through which trait? It has to be understood that the traits of Hashem, whether that be chesed, kindness, din, judgment, all of the various midot that Hashem has, tiferes, splendor, all of the, so to speak, midot are really the ways that Hashem interfaces with His creation, the way we perceive Hashem. Sometimes we perceive Hashem in a certain way with chesed, other times He seems to us, from our point of view, to be noheg, to conduct the world through strict justice. So they were asking how, through which midah, as the Ramban says, Ki Moshe Amar lefonav Yisparach, Ramalo Ma Shemov Higid Lehem Hashem Sheyore Hora Shlema Al Mitzias Al Hashkacha. Which is the name that you'll be revealing, the way you'll reveal yourself? HaKadosh Baruch Hu Heshiv, Lama zeh yishalu l'shmi? Why are you asking my name? Ein lehem tzorech liros acheres ki echye imohem. I will be with them in all their pain. That will happen to them. The name of providence, the name through which the Geula, the redemption, will come back from Mitzrayim, would come through the name Ekia. Let's try and understand this. The Geula, the redemption that we wait for today, parallels the original Geula, the original redemption from Egypt. And therefore, that name, Ekia, which is connected to the redemption of Egypt, is also going to be associated with the Geula, which we wait for on a daily basis. In the Nusach Sfarad, if you daven the Nusach, the version, the Spanish Nusach as it's called, Sfarad, it mentions this very shim in the Kedusha. The Kedusha prayer, it says in Nusach Sfarad, Hein ga'alti eschem achris kereshes. For I will redeem you in the end, achris kereshes, just as I did in the beginning. Meaning, every detail of the Geula from Mitzrayim is therefore going to be replicated in the final Geula, so that it should come b'meheira v'yomeinu. So as this name is Ekia, we need to understand what is the understanding of this word Ekia. So the Arizal explains its meaning, which is it's a name, it's a rather concealed way of putting it. It's a name that repeats itself. Ekia, Asher Ekia. Now, the name Ekia, the gematria of Ekia, is 21. Ekia. Aleph, Hey, Yud, and Hey. 21. 21 times by 21 is 441. And 441 is the gematria of Emes, truth. The midah of truth, of Emet, is the midah, truth in its ultimate form, as we said several times before. Something, when it's times by itself, is the ultimate expression of that thing. The Maharal in several places says that 7 is connected to this world. There are 7 days in the week, 7 colors in the rainbow, 7 notes in the diatonic scale. If you times 7 by 7, that's the most that this world can ever be. For example, 49, 7 times 7. There are 49 Sharei Tuma, gates of impurity. And when the Klal Yisrael were about to leave Mitzrayim, they were at that 49th gate. If they descended any further, then the Geula would not have been possible. They would have been swallowed up into the Tuma, into the impurity of Egypt, to a degree that it would have been impossible to ever extract them. 49 is the maximum that this world can ever be. And similarly, there are 49 Memtes Shari Bina, yeah?
Very quickly, 49 times 9?
No, 7 times 7 is 49.
49 times 9 is 441.
Wow. 49
Times 9?
times 9.
Is 441.
Well, why 9? Okay.
9 is MS.
9.
And it goes to MS.
441 is MS, but why 9? 41 times 9. All right, maybe we'll come back to that later. Anyway, well, the point I'm trying to bring out is that something which is multiplied by itself is the ultimate extension of the possibility of that thing can be. It's, so to speak, it's played out to its maximum. Olam Hazeh, as we said, is 7 colors in the rainbow, 7 days in the week, 7 notes in the diatonic scale. 49 Shari Tuma, 49 Memtes Shari Bina, gates of supernal wisdom. And the days we count between Pesach and Shavuos are 49. We don't count Shavuos. Shavuos is the 50th day because 50 is something which is beyond this world. We've talked about this in the past. 21 times 21. That's the maximum, as the Arizal, it is a name which repeats itself, times by itself. That's MS. Let's talk a bit about the sort of MS that we're talking about. Truth. MS is truth. The Medrash provides us with an insight into emes as it relates to the creation. If you look at note number 5, This is a Medrash Rabbim Bereshis Pashas Ches, Psikta, Ches. Omer Rabbi Simon. Rabbi Simon said, B'shasha HaKadosh Baruch Hu, at the time when Hashem, Shabo HaKadosh Baruch Hu l'roses ha'odam, when he came to create man, Adam HaRishon, the first man, Nasu malech hashares kitim. The ministering angels, so to speak, became various groups. V'chaburat chaburot. Mehem, amongst them, Omrim, some of these groups said, one of these groups said, Al Yibare, do not create man. Umehem Omrim Yibare. And there was another group that said, do create man. Hahu diktiv, as it says in Tehillim, Chesed ve'emes nifkashu. Tzedek v'sholom nishku. There was a, so to speak, an argument. Chesed oimer Yibare, create man. Why? Shehu gomel chasedim. Man is capable of doing kindness. Va'emes oima, and truth said, al yibare, do not create man. Shekula shkarim, that he is all falsehood. Not that man tells lies, but his essence is shkarim. Tzedek oima, on the other hand, tzedek, righteousness. Justice said, yibare, create man. Shehu oised tzedakos, that he is capable of doing right, behaving righteously. Shalom Omer al Yibare. Peace, the midah of peace said, do not create him. The kule katota, he's all argument and strife. Ma'aseh HaKadosh Baruch Hu, what did Hashem do? Notal emes, he took emes, truth, v'hishlichu la'aretz, and he threw it down to the ground. Hahu diksiv, as it says in Daniel, Vatashlech emes arza, and you have cast down truth to the ground. Omre malachei hashares, lifnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the ministering angel said to Hashem, Rabbono Olamim, Master of the world, Ma'ata mevazeh tachsis al tichasya. Why have you so besmirched, you've made cheap, mevazeh, you've disgraced your imprimatur, the signet ring, so to speak, the imprimatur of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is emes. Emes is the signature of Hashem. Why, say the Malachei Shabbos, have you cast down truth, emes, to the ground in such a fashion? Tale emes mina aretz. Let truth arise from the ground. Hahu dichsiv, as it says in Tehillim, emes me'eretz titzmach. Truth will, from the land, titzmach, will sprout. Very difficult to understand. That the midah of emes, the midah of geula, ekia she ekia, emes, 411, which is the midah of the geula, the redemption. How is that? How do we understand that in the very creation of man, man's creation, that as a process of this, that emes, part of man's creation, so to speak, part of his job in this world, at this very beginning, that truth was cast down to the ground in order that it could rise up. Let's try and understand this. Should also be noted that Vatashlech emetz arza in Daniel, it's a part of Daniel which refers to the exile. The exiles of Daniel had a dream of the 4 kingdoms we've talked about in previous times. That was that part of that phrase, emes, meretz titzmach, that truth should sprout from the land, is actually connected to a part of Daniel where he's talking about the Golus. Now, as I said, Daniel was describing the various animals which represent the exiles in his dream. and he describes how a tzvir ha'izim, a young goat, destroyed the aisle, the ram, which was powerless. This tzvir ha'izim was extremely strong, this young goat, and its single horn became 4. So Rashi explains this is a reference to the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash. And as I said, Vateshlech emetz arza is mentioned precisely in this context. That is the description of the Golus that we find ourselves in to this day, the Golus of Rome, the Golus, the exile, which has gone on and on and on and on, as we mentioned in previous times, that there are 4 world historical exiles the Jewish people will suffer. Chronologically, there are Babylon, Porus Umadai, Persia and Media, Greece and Rome. All of the first 3 exiles were relatively limited. The exile of Babylon before the Jews returned was 70 years. The exile of Persia and Media, 52 years. The exile of Greece, which we've just gone through celebrating Hanukkah, was 180 years. The exile of Rome, we're into this day. So clearly, when we talk about Geula, the Geula is the Geula that we're waiting now. Hein Ga'alti Acharis Koreishis, as it says. Why would the Medrash quote that very posuk, the description of the 4th exile and the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash, as Rashi describes over there, in connection with Hashem's creation of man? The power of Edom, of Rome, there's a famous Gemara which describes, excuse me, no, where is it? Put it here. Yeah, here we are. A period of time when the Romans, at the same time the Romans destroyed the Beis HaMikdash, Gemara describes how Rabbi Yossi ben Kisma fell ill and Rabbi Chanina ben Chadian went to visit him. And Rabbi Chanina was eventually killed by the Romans for teaching Torah. Edom remains in power, and it took the Torah. The Torah is called the Rachmona. Rabbi Chanina was challenged Rabbi Yossi challenged him for his flagrant disregard of the laws against public Torah learning. Public Torah learning. This was instituted by the power of the Romans. They were clearly in charge. And Rabbi Chanina responded, Min hashamayim yirachameu. From heaven should have mercy on you. This lashon of rachamim, they should have mercy. The Torah is called Rachmona. And what he was saying is that although the Romans had political control, they had no dominion over the Torah. And he finishes off the conversation by Rabbi Yossi saying to Rabbi Chanina, I would not be surprised if you do not burn and you and the Torah in a scroll of fire, which is exactly how Rabbi Yossi died. Which is exactly how Rabbi Chanina died. Rabbi Yossi died and the greats of Rome came to eulogize him. Rabbi Chanina continued to teach the Torah. They took him away and they burned him with a Sefer Torah. In other words, the forced exile of Rome lowers the Torah to the ground, burns the Torah. Hashem, similarly in the process of creation, threw the Torah to the ground. Let's try and understand. There are really 2 kinds of emes, 2 expressions of emes. Hashem cast emes down to the ground because he wanted emes me'aretz titzmach. The emes which opposed the creation of man is an emes which cannot tolerate sheker, falsehood. Truth that cannot tolerate falsehood. And Hashem cast it down and he said that it shouldn't just rise from the ground, but it should be titzmach. It should sprout. Now the process of sprouting is something where decomposition takes place before growth. In any plant which produces a sizable amount of grain or multiplies to any great extent, there's always a process of decomposition. If you've ever planted a seed, you'll see that the seed doesn't grow. Usually it doesn't grow. What happens is, it starts to decompose. And only at the point of its decomposition does it sprout. And when it sprouts into a very strong, much greater amount than the original seed. This is the idea, that by eretz being cast downward, it would sprout, it would reveal a kind of emes. And this is really what the point I want to get to tonight. A kind of emes which was not the emes which cannot brook sheker, a truth that cannot stand falsehood, the truth that said, don't create man. This was a truth which would take all of the sheker in the world, and the sheker itself, the falsehood of the world, would admit to emes. The sheker itself would be transformed into the greatest power of the recognition of truth. Again, there are two kinds of truth. There's a truth which rejects sheker, rejects falsehood. But falsehood, so to speak, still stands against it. The greater truth is when that falsehood rots, when that falsehood is forced, so to speak, to admit to the truth. It then becomes part of the truth itself, like the process of a seed that grows from nothing. The same is true about the process through which an egg becomes a chicken. The Gemara asks about the status of a chicken which is born from an egg laid by a chicken who is a treifa. A treifa is determined as an animal which in its present state cannot survive for 12 months. That's a treifa. What about if this chicken laid an egg, and it's clear the mother is opened up, and it's clear that it's a treifa for sure? What about the egg? Is the egg a treifa as well? The Gemara answers no, that seeing as by the process of the chick being born requires the egg, just like the seed, to decompose to the point where it now becomes a new life. Therefore the chick is permissible. You can eat the chick. There's a medrash that says that Hashem spreads the Jewish people across the world in order to increase geirim, converts. And it proves it from a pasuk which says, V'zratia li ba'aretz. Uzratia li ba'aretz. I have sown her for myself in the land. The Medrash explains that one sows a small measure of grain in order to arrive at many core, much, much larger measure of produce. This is the idea of planting geirim. Our whole exile amongst the nations of the world is a process of zariah, of planting. In our being scattered amongst the nations, we're transformed into a seed, a shoot, so that far more will come from us than the investment that we put into it. Far more will come. And the Arizal explains that when we're talking about, when the Medrash says that Hashem spread us amongst the nations of the world to increase geirim, we're not talking about physical numbers of converts. The size, if you think about it, of converts is minuscule over the ages. What does it mean then? What are the nature of these geirim? And that is absolutely connected to what we're talking about Hashem casting emes to the ground. Emes, that true emes, the emes which rises from the ground, arises from amidst the attempts to nullify it. When Reish Lakish died, Rabbi Yochanan would mourn for him every time he taught a class. So aware was he of the absence of Reish Lakish, which was so painful to him. And his students tried to console him and understand why the loss of Reish Lakish was so tragic for him, so painful. After all, they observed, they would bring many proofs to Rabbi Yochanan's every statement. And what could be better than that? Rabbi Yochanan said no. He mourned Reish Lakish just because of that. Reish Lakish had so many questions as a result of all of the kashas that he had on him. That resulted in a greater emes, once it emerged from the mistakes. The process of learning comes from challenging. The process of learning comes not from agreement, but from disagreement, from challenges. This is the idea. The Gerim, which are born of Hashem's planting us throughout the world, comes, that's the fourth Torah, the fourth exile that we're now in, which denigrates the Torah. This is exactly how from this fourth exile, from our being spread amongst the nations, will result in the abundant produce. These are the Gerim. The emes, it's the emes which produces those Gerim, which are joined to the people, joined to the Jewish people. Every place that the Torah has ever gone to, every culture, has its own particular system of sheker, of falsehood. And through a small number of Jews living in that place and being a visible rejection, that small cluster of Jews learning Torah in that particular place, whether it be China or America or France or England, that produces Gerim, the produce, the seed of the sheker which admits to the emes in the end. Each culture has its own way of life, and that culture says it's impossible to live in any other way. And in every instance, the Jews completely reject that culture. As we see today, everything that the world, this modern world, stands for gets further and further away from the emes of the Torah, the rejection of the Torah. The Torah is cast down. And we carry on to produce Gerim by being seeded amongst the nations. And as we said, the Gerim are not the physical number of converts. It's that process of the sheker of the world, of the falsehood of all the cultures of the world, admitting to the emes of the Torah. This idea of the zaro kale, of the seed rotting, the decomposition of the seed or the chick or whatever it is, this is the addition of Gerim. Hashem planted emes, that's us, that's the Torah, in a realm of sheker, in the world, a world which has every single culture, as we say, sees itself as the revelation, as the salvation of man. Hashem threw the Torah to the ground and us together with it into Golus. Put us in a place where it's going to be denigrated and not grasped as the truth. So often nowadays we hear how, we're the extremists, we're the madmen. And he planted us here in this inimical, hostile culture through the 2,000 years that we've been in exile. Nobody plants a saw, a small amount, only to produce many kurim, great, great, great abundance. So it's critical that the Torah's emes has to enter into every culture, regarding its size, and bring this process to fruition. It's significant. We see that the Jews are, and always have been, and always will be, for the very much, the main part, hated. We bother the nations. There's something about us they can't quite put their finger on. We're the filthy rich, we're the filthy poor, We're the ruthless cosmopolitans, we're the bastions of industry, we're the revolutionaries, we're the reactionaries. Nobody's quite sure exactly what the specific crime of the Jew is, but the whole world understands that everything we represent is a rejection of what they stand for. And the whole process of golus, of exile, is to penetrate every culture and cause it eventually to crumble and to admit to the emes, v'tishlach arza, that the Torah has been sent to the ground. This, at the very creation of man, atem kruim odom, this is the job of the Jewish people, to bring, to cause to rise, emes me'eretz titzmach, this rising up, this process of the destruction, so to speak, which will be the process of geula, of redemption, when the whole world comes to its end. It'll suddenly, very suddenly, just crumble. And sprouting from that will be this emes, which is built on the recognition, on the admittance of sheker to emes. The book of Shmos, which we just started, marks the passage from the realm of the Avos, Bereshis, Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, to the Banim. It's the era also in which Golus, exile, takes hold. The prototypical exile of Mitzrayim, of Egypt, which holds within it all of the seeds of all of the exiles that will ever be, till this last exile that we're in today. We say every day in our prayers that Hashem is going to bring a goel, livnei v'neihem, to the children of the children, meaning the children of the Shvatim. Why don't we describe the geula as simply as something which comes to the children of the Avos, the Banim? Why livnei v'nim? Why do we talk about the children of the children? Why do we talk about their grandchildren, their descendants? And the answer is that all of the Shvatim, the children of the Avos, the Shiftei Ko, the tribes of Israel, the offspring of Yaakov Avinu, were intrinsically connected to the Avos. And the Gemara says, the Medrash says that their names actually are all associated with Geula. If you look down at note 14. Ruvain, it says in Shmos, Ra'ei Re'isi es oni ami. That's Lashon of Geula. Shimon, Al Shem, V'yishma Elokim es nakosam. The God heard their cries, their shouts, their screams. All of the Banim, the Shiftei Ka, are intrinsically connected to their fathers. Excuse me. Golus only begins with the children of the children. Those grandchildren, those children of the Shvatim were no longer directly connected to the Avos. And therefore they could be the expression of the emes which is thrown to the ground. They are the children of exile. They represent the generation where the Torah is lowered, and they are the ones who will be seeded, as it says, Maisa Ovis Simon Labonim, that the actions of the fathers are a signpost to the children. Just like Klal Yisrael went into exile in Mitzrayim, so the diaspora, as we call it, the spreading out of the Jewish people throughout all of the nations, was through the B'nei V'neihem, those who are disconnected from that original contact with the Avos. They are the ones who represent the emes which is thrown to the ground, which will sprout up again. Because without that step, that intermediate step, then the Geula could not have grown from the Geula would have been a Geula of the Avos, of that first kind of emes, as we said. And the whole point of Hashem throwing emes down to the ground in the very creation of man was there should be resultant emes, a greater emes, a stronger emes, which converts all of the sheker. That sheker rots and comes out of that this great abundance of emes on a much stronger, larger level. As we said in the beginning, Hashem's name, which is associated with the Geula, is Ekia Asher Ekia. By multiplying something by itself, the implication is that everything is contained in it. It's as we said at the beginning, the ultimate extension, the ultimate protraction, the ultimate something times that's by itself. There can be no greater, no fuller expression than that. And that is the emes which will be extrapolated to its maximum through the process of the Geula, where Sheker itself becomes the agent of the greatest emes. Golus is not a period of time characterized by a less pleasant lifestyle followed by a comfortable Geula. That's a Sheker. Things just go. We don't think Geula is just like we're going to have, it's going to be more comfortable. And it's going to be nice and nicer and get better and better. It doesn't mean that you have another car, or it doesn't mean that you'll be able to eat sushi every day. Geula is the rebirth of the entire world, and it's all going to appear very differently. Somebody who contemplates our world today realizes that we're enveloped in a system of sheker which all depends one on another, like a house of cards. Each sheker defends the other sheker. If you look at politics, if you look at everything, it's just more and more sheker. Eventually that bubble will burst. Well, all the sheker in the world, and we'll awake. Hayinu kecholmim, we'll have been like dreamers, as we say in Shir HaMalos. We'll awaken to find a reality completely different from the one that we're living in now, which is a dream. And just like when a person's in a dream, it seems very real to him. But when he wakes up, he realizes it was a complete sheker. That will be the experience of Geula, real Geula. That you'll see that everything was just. We have eyes to see now. I mean, anybody with eyes can see. But we live in it. We live it. We accept it. We have no option. The only place that we can find truth is in the Torah. But the rest of our lives are caught up in this worldwide system of sheker. And when the Geula comes, it will be quite literally, as we spoke in previous week, a hippuch. Everything will be overthrown. It'll be quite literally like waking up into another reality. That'll be very traumatic unless we spend our time preparing ourselves for that. And to understand that all the sheker in creation exists only to bring us to emes la'amita, the truest truth, the truth which emerges from the context of total and utter sheker. Should happen speedily in our days.